pleasant morning to all. I, Hinal Thakral, from IAI Student Chapter at Edi Patel Institute of Technology, CVM University, would like to take the privilege to welcome you all for today's workshop on development cycle on machine learning project. Our team expresses enormous euphoria to welcome Mr. Krish Naik sir, the lead data scientist and mentor at Innovian Academy and also lead data scientist at the Panasonic Indian Innovation Center. He has also been a software engineer at HCL Technologies. Furthermore, he owns a YouTube channel named Krish Naik with over 237K plus subscribers. We are immensely delighted to welcome Mr. Krish Naik sir to enlighten us about machine learning project.
Uh, Thank you, Hinal. Hello, good morning, guys. Myself, Krish. Welcome to this complete, life cycle of a data science project. So, in this session, what we are going to do is that we are going to cover all the things. I'll just try to implement a project in front of you, and then we'll try to cover each and everything. Before going ahead, let me just introduce myself. Before that, let me just share my screen so that you'll be able to see. There we go. Yeah. So I hope you're able to see my screen. Yeah. So if you don't know about me, guys, so my name is Krish Naik. You can see this. This is my YouTube channel where I upload many videos, okay, on data science. And apart from that, I've been working in this industry from past 6 years in the data science domain. Before I was a machine learning engineer, then I moved into data science. I started working in deep learning techniques, and currently, I'm leading a team of around 6 to 7 people and implementing projects. So, what we are going to do in this session is that we'll take a use case and we'll try to do a complete end-to-end deployment with respect to that specific use case in Heroku platform. So if you go and see, this is my Heroku platform. Now you can see that I this particular application is something called as car price prediction. So whatever value you submit over here, and when you predict, right, you'll be able to calculate the price of the car, like what value it should be sold at. Okay. So this particular video we are actually going to, this particular project that we are going to do over here, and you'll be seeing that what all steps we will actually follow, what are the things that we will be following. So coming to the work of a data scientist, so here is the complete PPT that I have actually defined or discussed over here. What all things a data scientist does in a company itself. So if I just talk about the normal architecture, right? So here you can see that you have a data science project use case in the left hand side. Then you go ahead with the requirement gatherings. In the requirement gatherings, there is a role which is called as business analyst or and the domain expertise of product owner. They start discussing with them, and they plan the sprint planning. So all the data science projects nowadays is usually following the agile process of development of the life cycle of a software product. So what they do is that they try to divide all these requirements based on sprints. So every sprint actually is of around 1 to 2 weeks. So usually people select 2 week, company go with 2 week or one sprint. Similarly, based on the use case, how big it is, it will be divided into various number of sprints. Then the next step that you have is that once the requirement is actually created, you know it is given to the data analyst or the data scientist for and data analyst. Once they get the requirement, they will again discuss with the domain expertise and product owner from where they can actually collect the data, which is a pretty much important step. So this discussion, what they do is that they basically discuss with each other, and then they decide like what product needs to, what data needs to be selected. Then after the discussion is done, that is actually sent to the internal database. That data probably maybe be coming from internal database, from a cloud or third party APIs or IoT, from where they are actually deciding the data to be considered to solve this particular project. Once they get that data, they take that data and give it to the big data engineering team so that they can efficiently store the data. Once the data is efficiently stored, the next step that we actually follow is the life cycle of a data science project. In this, now this is the work of a data analyst, what I've actually given, because there are various roles in data science, like data analyst, you have data scientist, you have big data engineer, you have machine learning engineer, you have machine learning researcher, and you have many more, right? So here, what the data analyst will do is that they'll be taking this information, they'll be doing the exploratory data analysis, and they'll be creating a lot of reports. These reports will be sent to the stakeholders, and the stakeholders will be actually responsible in making the decision making of business skills making decisions. So for that purpose, they will be actually using these particular reports. Now here is where the whole the life cycle of a data science project actually goes ahead with, where a data scientist is actively involved. So there are concepts like feature engineering, where they do exploratory data analysis, handling missing values, handling outliers, handling category features, normalization and standardization. Then there is a technique called as feature selection. Now in feature selection, there are techniques like correlation, forward elimination, backward elimination, univariate selection. So all these techniques are there. And again, if you have not seen my YouTube channel, all these videos has been already uploaded. Then you have like model creation and hyperparameter tuning. So in this particular technique, what we do is that we basically focus on doing all the hyperparameter tuning techniques like grid search CV, randomized search CV, Keras tuner, Bayesian optimizer, which is also called as hyperopt, genetic algorithms, and the other techniques. Then you basically have Dockerization. Then after doing the Dockerization, you do the model deployment on clouds like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and Heroku platform. And then we have model monitoring and retraining approach. So what we are going to do is that we are going to take a use case, we are going to solve all this particular problem, and then we are going to deploy it in the Heroku, and all those things will be actually shown in today's use case. Okay. So to begin with, what we are going to do is that first of all, from where did we take the data set? So the data set is basically taken from Kaggle, but usually in live scenarios, the companies will be providing data from various sources like third-party APIs and all. But in this video, what I'm going to do is that since we are not working on any live data, we'll be taking this Kaggle data set. And this Kaggle data set has data where you have information with respect to the cars, what should be the selling price, year, kilometers driven, fuel. And again, the selling price is what is the output that we need to compute. So what you can do is that just go into this URL like vehicle data set from Car Deco. Probably I'll be giving you the GitHub link in after this session. So this card details will basically be, you can download this card data.csv. Just click on this download button, but you need to have a Kaggle account. So once you download it, the data set will get downloaded. Then what you do is that first thing, always remember, whenever you start a project, you need to create an environment. So just search for how to create an environment. Create environment in Conda. Okay, by default, I'll be implementing this in Anaconda itself. If you don't know about Anaconda, again, it is basically used for creating your own environment itself, right? So here you can see that how an environment is basically getting created, right? So this is basically the command conda create -n my-env Python 3.6. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go to Anaconda prompt, okay? And then I'm basically going to paste this whole command. Here, the Python version, you can give anything like Python 3.7 if you want, Python 3.6 if you want, and any kind of Conda environment, right? So right now, what I have done is that you can use this command. Again, I'm telling you, you can use this command to create the new environment. Since I have already created this environment in my local, so I'm not going to execute this particular program again and again. Okay. Now, after you do this, it will probably take some time to create the environment, around 10 minutes. Just execute this whole command itself. Just give 3.7 if you really want to work in Python 3.7. Okay. This creating the Conda environment will be important because at the last you need to create one file, which is called as requirement.txt. Now this requirement.txt will actually tell you that what all libraries are actually required in order to solve that specific use case. Okay, so that is important. So that is the reason why you need to create an environment. Okay, now coming to this, now what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go and basically you'll be able to see that there is one ipynb file over here. Okay, ipynb, there is main.py, and there are many things. So what things we have to focus on? So first of all, what we are going to do is that first step, we have the data set. Now we'll create a model. And while we are creating this model, we have to follow the life cycle of a data science project, right? So we have to basically create a model which actually follows the life cycle of a data science project. In the second step, we will be creating a Flask app. Flask app, the reason why we create is that we need a front end, a front end place where we can place our inputs. And the back end, what it does is that once that input comes, that Flask app will interact with our model and get the output. The third step, once we get the output, we'll display the output, right? Something like this. Now, this is important. Why Flask is important? Because we can also create APIs. Okay, always remember that. So we are actually going to follow this. Okay. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is that for creating the model, I'll be using Jupyter Notebook because that is the best way in order to tell you like how to perform well, or so that you'll be able to understand. So you'll be able to see that I have my untitled ipynb file. Okay. Now this is how it goes out, right? See this. So first I've imported pandas as PD. I'm doing read underscore CSV as car data.csv. This is the same file that we have downloaded from here. You can see that. Okay. So after this, what we are going to do is that we are going to see the shape of this. So df.shape. If you are new to data science, if you don't know about pandas, how it works, definitely I cannot teach this from scratch, but you can refer my videos because here the main focus is to show you an end-to-end project in machine learning projects, right? So after you read this particular data set, you have .df.shape. In the df.shape, you see that there are 301 records and 9 features. Okay. And if you really want to see what are the features, I'll just execute it in front of you. So if you write df.head, you'll be able to see all these are my features. These are the top 5 records. And here, again, my main output is basically selling price. Okay. So what I am actually going to again do is that you will be able to see that over here, some of the features like seller type, fuel type, right? Transmission, and owner, right? These all are category features already, because here you'll be seeing that there are fixed number of categories. Like if I take the example of fuel type, right? I'll be able to see that in fuel type you have petrol, diesel, and CNG. Okay. Similarly, if you see in seller type, you have like diesel or individual. Right? Okay, dealer or individual. Okay, sorry, dealer and individual. So with respect to seller type, now the reason why I'm just taking this all features, which are like category features, I'm going to perform something called as one-hot encoding, which will be involved to convert this category features into some values which the model will be able to understand. The values will be like zeros and ones. Okay. So I'm going to execute this, and I'm showing you that the seller type basically has two categories. Fuel type has basically three categories. Then transmission has two categories. Owner has three categories. Okay. Then this is, and always remember, guys, as I told you that if I go over here in the feature engineering, if you see, we have to do an exploratory data analysis. We have to handle the missing values and various things, right? So over here, always remember the first step that you need to check the missing values, whether the data set is having any missing values or not. If it is having some missing values, you have to do something in order to handle those missing values. And again, there are various ways. You can check my playlist of feature engineering in my channel. That will be very, very helpful. Okay. So now df.isnl.sum. So I have all these particular techniques. Okay. Now you can see that over here when I'm trying to find out whether there is any missing values, all the values are zeros. Okay. Similarly, I can use df.describe. This will actually give you some information like what is the mean, what is the standard deviation, what is the minimum value, what is the 25 percentile value, what is the 50 percentile value, 75 percentile value, what is the max value with respect to all the integer features. You should always remember that here the categorical features will not be considered. So the category features like seller type, fuel type, transmission will not be present over here, right? Because this describe is basically finding all this information, and this information can be only found out when your features are having integer values. Okay, this you need to take care of it. Now what I'm doing is that I'm selecting all the necessary features that is actually required. So these are all the features that are required: year, selling price, present price, kilometers driven, fuel type, seller type, transmission, and owner. And then I'm actually seeing the head of this particular data set. Now, one thing that we really need to take care of. Now, over here, you see that there is a feature called as year. Okay. Now, in this year, you have values like 2014, 2013, 2017. Okay. One thing that you need to note that directly we cannot use this year. Okay. Because there may be values like 1960, 1970, 1980, right? So whenever you have feature like year in your data set, what you actually have to do is that you have to create a derived feature. Derived feature basically means that you need to find out that how many years has been over for this particular car. Now, suppose if this car was bought in 2014, so if I try to find out that how old is this car, how do you get it? You just take 2020, which is your current year, and you subtract with 2014, right? So when you do that, 2020 minus 2014, the total number of years is 6 years, right? Similarly, if you try to calculate the number of years with respect to 2013, it will be 7. So what we do is that we have to create a derived feature. We cannot just use directly this year. Anyhow, it will not give you better performance. So what we can do is that what I did is that I created a new feature, which is called as current year. Now inside this current year, I'm giving the value as 2020. Okay. So when I go and see the head, you'll be able to see that there is a current year which is having the value 2020. Okay. Now what we do is that we take this year and then we take this year and we subtract it. That will actually help us to find out how many number of years basically the car is old, right? So that same thing we are actually doing over here. So I've used final underscore data set. I've just written a new feature which is called a number of years. And then I'm writing final underscore data set current year minus final underscore data set year. When we subtract this two, I'm actually going to get the number of years that particular car has been bought for, right? So this value will be pretty much important because this feature only we will be taking or will be considering in order to train my models and create my model. So I have my final data set dot head. Okay. So here you'll be able to see that there is a new feature which is called as number of years. So I have 67396. So like this, anytime any data set is actually given to you, you have to perform different feature engineering techniques one by one. This is just creating a new derived feature. Okay, so this way we have actually created a new derived feature, and it depends like how do you create. You have to come up with your own logic, and that is where domain knowledge is very important. Okay, now once this is done, guys, what we are going to do is that we are going to drop this year. This year is not required because we already have number of years, right? So I've dropped it. You can see over here that was not required altogether. Okay, um okay, so once we drop this particular year, okay, now your data set looks like this. You can also drop this current year also, guys, because this is not required anymore. Okay, but here I have not done it. You can actually do it by your own if you want, but anyhow all these values are same, so no impact will be there. Okay, so anyhow you can drop that particular year, and now you can see your values over here itself. Then what we are doing now is that we have to perform something called as one hot encoding. And in order to perform one hot encoding, I told you why do we require one hot encoding. Because remember, in fuel type, in seller type, in transmission, these all are category features, right? So in order to convert these category features into some numerical values, there are a lot of techniques, and one of the technique is called as one hot encoding. Whenever your categories are less number, you can perform easily one hot encoding. So for that, what we are going to do is that we are just going to write pd.get_dummies. In pandas, there is a function which is called as get_dummies, and this get_dummies will actually help you to convert all your category features into numerical features by the technique of one hot encoding itself. So when I perform this particular step, if I go and see now, you'll be able to see there is something called as fuel type diesel, fuel type petrol. So you have 0110, 010110. Suppose if both the values are 00, that basically indicates that it is the third category, which is nothing but CNG. Okay. Now this is with respect to fuel type. There is also something called as seller type. So here you can see seller type and transmission manual. Here also you have 010110 like that. If all the values are 00, at that time it basically indicates the third category. Okay. Now here you can see that we have performed one hot encoding, and this we are still in the feature engineering, guys. Okay. Then you can see that I've also dropped this current year because I don't require it. As I told you, if you really want to keep it, but no use of keeping it. Okay, so here I've actually dropped the current year also. Okay, now this is where my whole data set is ready now. You can see that every features, every categories has got converted into category features. I mean integer values. Always remember your main focus should be that in your data set, after doing all the feature engineering techniques, you should not even have one categories also in your data set. Okay, now the next step is that basically we are trying to find out the correlation between all these particular features along with the independent feature like selling price. Okay, now here you can see that this is the correlation. The correlation always the value ranges between -1 to +1. -1 to +1 basically indicates if the value is towards +1, that indicates, suppose if I take this particular example, I see that this present price and selling price, this correlation is 87%. That basically indicates that if the present price increases, the selling price also increases. That is how positively correlated it is. Okay, this is what this particular correlation basically indicates. Suppose if your correlation is 87%, right, and if your present price is increasing, then your selling price will also increase by 0.8%, 0.87%. Suppose there is a present price of 100 rupees on a car, right? Tomorrow, suppose it becomes 120. Then how much was the increase? 20 rupees was increased, right? So in case of selling price also, 0.87% of the 20 rupees will get increased. Okay, so something like that. So always you need to understand in that specific way. Suppose if it is negative correlated. Now suppose in this example, I can see seller type individual and selling price are negatively correlated. Selling price is basically my output feature, right? So they are negatively correlated. That basically means that if I if I increase this particular value to something else, right, at that time if I go and see the selling price, it will be inversely proportional. Okay, similarly you can see all this particular technique in case of number of years also, it is inversely proportional. It should be inversely proportional, right? if the number of years of the car increases, obviously your selling price will decrease, right? So that is what it basically indicates, right? So this is pretty much important to understand. Now, if you really want to see this correlation graph like this with the help of pair plot, you can also see, right? So this is an example of pair plot to show that how your data is actually distributed. And then you can also take this example. This is a Seaborn heat map. This is also works on correlation. So here we are basically using Seaborn as SNS. You are using same df.correlation, and then you are basically doing the heat map. Okay. And here is all your data set. You can see amazing data set. You can see that present price and which feature is this? Present price and selling price are more than 88% correlated. So like this, it is showing it in very green color. It will show in the red color when it is having negative values. Okay. So then what we do is that in the next step, we will be dividing this data set into independent and dependent features. So obviously, you know that selling price is basically my dependent feature. The selling price is my dependent feature. So I'm going to put that in my y-axis. Similarly, my independent features will be put in my x-axis. Okay. Then I'm actually seeing x dot head. So this is all my values over here, right? Y dot head is basically my all these values. Now the very important thing is that we'll try to see whether each and every feature is important or not. Whether each and every feature is basically important in my model creation or not. So for that, we use the concept of feature importance, which is actually done by extra tree regressor. So extra tree regressor is an library which is basically used in sklearn, which will actually help you to provide the feature importance, like which is basically the most feature important. And this internally also uses correlation. Okay. So once I do the fit on X and Y, if I go and check my feature importance, here you can see that 0.37 value, 0.37 highest score is basically given to the first feature in my x-axis. In my x-axis, the first feature is nothing but present price. Okay. Then you have, and this is all in, you can actually put it in ascending order also. Okay. Ascending order so that you can actually check. If you really want to see the ascending order, I have actually plotted a graph for feature importance. Okay. And I've actually taken the top 5 largest. So here you can see present price is your first, fuel type diesel is your second, seller type individual is your third, transmission manual is your fourth, number of years is your fifth. So these are my top 5 feature in order to solve this specific problem. Okay. So here you can see that the most importance is actually given to present price, then you have fuel type diesel, then you have seller type individual, transmission manual, and number of years. Okay. Then this is just to show you that which are the features important, but in this example I've taken all the features that is actually required to solve that particular problem. Then I'm actually doing a train test split. In the train test split, what we do is that we basically split the whole data set into test data and train data. Here the test size that I have taken is 30%, 70% will be in the train data and 30% will be in the test data. After that, you can see that I've actually performed random forest regressor because this is a continuous regression problem. I've initialized random forest regressor, and then here you can see that I've performed hyperparameter tuning. Okay. So for hyperparameter tuning, what are the important features that are required, like n underscore estimators, max underscore features, then you have max underscore depth, then you have minimum underscore samples underscore split, minimum underscore samples underscore leaf, because this all features will be, in randomized RCB, what we do is that we actually play with all this particular feature and try to find out which is the best feature that we should consider in order to solve this particular problem. Then you have something called as random grid. This is just like a key value pairs that we need to provide it into our random forest regressor when we are doing this randomized RCB. Now you can see the parameter name that I have given random grid. Now what we do is that inside this random grid, we have this all key value pairs, and these are the values that needs to be hyperparameter tuned, right? So you can see these are all my values that needs to be hyperparameter tuned. So what we do is that we actually use this randomized RCB. You can see that in the estimator, I'm providing random forest, but in this param distribution, I have to provide this random grid so that, at the end of the day, what it will do is that this whole randomized RCB It will iterate through all the different parameters that are present inside this, and it will select the best parameter considering the scoring mechanism as negative mean squared error. So if you don't know, in regression problem statement, performance metrics are like R squared, adjusted R squared. You have mean absolute error, mean squared error, and many other things. Then you have n underscore iteration as 10, CV is equal to 5, purpose is equal to 2. This is just to show all the details when we are actually training. Internally, we are also performing cross validation. And this n underscore iteration is equal to 10 basically indicates that for each validation, we are actually going to iterate through 10 times, which will be working on this specific parameters itself, right? Then you can see that next step is basically doing fit of X train and Y train. You can check it out like how things goes on. Suppose with n underscore estimators equal to 900, 10 different iteration will be present. Then again with 1100, 10 different iteration will be present. Then with 300, 10 different iteration will be present. So something like this, lot of this will probably take around 5 to 10 minutes for your training if you have powerful system. But at the end of the day, after this, you will be able to find out that which is the best param that is got selected. So for that, we just select a parameter. There's an inbuilt operator which is called as best underscore params underscore, where you will be able to find out that the model has performed well with all these particular estimators. So suppose if you have n underscore estimators at 1000, your minimum sample split is equal to 2, minimum sample leaf is equal to 1, the max feature that is being required is SQRT, and max depth is equal to 25. Now, one thing you may be considering, Krish, I know there may be some people who will be saying that, Krish, I don't know this many things. So the thing is that every step by step, everything has been explained in my YouTube channel playlist itself. Because again, over here, as the agenda is just to show you an end-to-end machine learning project. So I'm going with this particular strategy. Otherwise, in my YouTube channel, I really just upload, just for hyperparameter tuning, I upload around 2 to 3 videos. And with respect to other, I upload other videos, right? So there I divide it. Here, actually, I'm trying to cover everything in one. Okay. So once you get your best features, then you just do a prediction on a X test. And then here you can see that when I'm actually checking my Y test and prediction difference, it is actually forming a Gaussian distribution. This actually shows that your model is actually performing well and you are having a good value with respect to that. And with respect to the scatter plot also, you can see that it is actually following in this particular pattern, right? As I told you, in performance metrics, we have something called as mean absolute error, mean squared error, root mean squared error. So all these techniques we have, and we are having this particular value. You can see that it is very, very less. Now, and after this, what we do is that we actually create a random forest pickle file. Now, this pickle file will be used in our front-end application where we are actually creating with the Flask. Okay. So once I execute this, if I go and show you over here, you'll be able to see this pickle file that is got created. This pickle file is nothing but it is a serialized format file. And this serialized format file can be taken ahead with any front-end application. Okay. Now, what I have to do is that the next step, I'll go to my Anaconda prompt. Okay. And I'll go and open Spider. Okay. The reason why I'm opening Spider, because now my model creation is ready. Now I have to create my front-end application. Okay. I have to create my front-end application. Now, what are the important things when you are actually creating your front-end application? Let's see. So I'm just going to go to this particular path. Okay. Files. Can we just zoom in so that you'll be able to see? Now, in front-end application, guys, you'll be able to see that there is a format over here. Inside the templates, you have something like index.html. Now, this index.html is basically your front-end application. Okay. So what your page will look like. Okay. So if I go over here, if I reload this, if I reload this, so this is basically the page that I am actually showing in my index.html. In this page, you will be able to provide inputs. You'll be able to provide inputs over here, inputs over here, inputs over here. You'll be able to select this. And remember, for a category feature, whenever you are creating a front end, try to create it as a drop down box. At least you will be able to select one. But remember all these things when you do, right? All the feature engineering that you have done in your model building process, the same feature engineering you have to do over here. Okay. Now, suppose this petrol has been converted into zeros and ones, right? In one word encoding, that same technique needs to be followed over here. And whenever you have a category feature, you try to convert this into, or you try to show it in the form of drop down box. Okay. So here you saw that we had 3 category features. So I'm actually trying to show it in that format. Okay. So now with respect to this only, this whole HTML is created. Again, as a data scientist, you don't have to worry much about this HTML because there will be a front end team who will be doing this. But the reason that I have created this one is just to give you an idea like how things can be handled, when we are actually creating. And it need not, if you really want to become a data scientist, you really want to come up with an end-to-end project, it need not be such a complicated index.html that you have to create. You can just create a simple one where you're just giving some 4 to 5 inputs. Okay. And then you are actually predicting it from your model. So again, you can see that all the fields like predictive analysis is basically written over here. Then you have year is actually present over here. Then you have an input box. So this is basically an input box given over there. What is the showroom price is basically a third header. So here you can see what is the showroom price in length. Then you basically have an input box again, right? Input box again. Similarly, you have all the other parameters that is actually given over here. So based on that, you can give some background color. If you are in college, you may probably know simple HTML. So based on that, you can actually create it. Now, this was with respect to index.html. The next thing that you have to come up with is something called as proc file. Now, this proc file, we will try to, since we are going to use Heroku platform, we are basically going to use this web :g unicorn app is equal to app. App is equal to app basically means that when you are actually hosting this in the Heroku platform, we are actually calling this app.py. Okay. They will be having one. Always remember, we have to give the first file which will start the running of the whole life cycle of a data science project. So this app is nothing but this app.py file that we have created over here. Okay. So app.py. So what it is going to do is that from your Flask app, it is going to call this particular app. Now, when it is calling this particular app, you can see that here we have used something called as Flask. Okay. Now, first of all, what we are doing inside this Flask, we are loading the random forest pickle file in the read byte mode. Okay. And here you will be able to see that we have created 3 app routes. One is /root. The other one is /predict. And the, 2 types only, slash and /predict. Okay. Only these 2 techniques has been followed. This /predict is basically after we submit the button with all the inputs, because that method is actually a post. Okay. And this method is actually a get. Now see this. I'll go over here. Over here, if I write slash, this slash is going to run this particular function. Okay, because here you can see it is a slash over here, and we are giving methods is equal to get. So here, when I execute it, okay, you'll be able to see that it is displaying index.html. Because why it is displaying index.html? Because this is nothing but it is actually redirecting to a home function where it is saying that render template with index.html. So index.html is nothing but this one. Okay. And this is what is getting displayed over here. Right. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just write all the information like this. Suppose I say 6 lakhs, how many kilometers driven, 3,000, how many previous petrol. Suppose I say petrol, I say individual, I say automatic car. Now, once I calculate the selling price, right? Once I calculate the selling price, as soon as I click this button, right? As soon as I click this button, so this calculating selling price is actually given over here, right? It is a submit button. Now this submit will be actually going for URL for predict, right? URL for predict. Now this predict is nothing but if I go in my app.py, this is what is my predict function. This is my predict function, right? So here you will be able to see that then we do a request.post, we get the year value, we get the present price, kilometers driven to, here we are basically taking all the values that has been given over here, Okay, it has been given over here. You can see over here. Then I've actually converted that into one hot encoding also. If fuel petrol type is equal to petrol, this, then I have also created my new derived feature, right? 2020 minus year. That is what we have actually done over here, right? And the same steps we had actually done in the model building. Now, once we get all the values, then what we do? We actually just write model.predict. Model is already been loaded over here, right? In a random forest pickle file, right? Model has been already loaded over here. Now, same model file, we'll just write model.predict, which all the features that is being given inside this. Okay, with all the features that is given inside this, right? Present price, kilometers driven, owner, year, fuel type, diesel, fuel type, petrol, seller type, individual, transmission, manual, right? All these values are given over here. Then you'll be getting your prediction as an output. And finally, your output will be displayed in again index.html with the value like prediction text. Now, this prediction text is nothing but it is basically you'll be able to see here that value will get displayed. Okay, which is nothing but an H3 after the form submit. Okay, so when I calculate the selling price, you'll be able to see that the price is showing 1.74, right? 1.74. So suppose if this car was at 6 lakh rupees, it is saying that after having all this particular feature, you can sell the car at 1.74 lakhs. Okay, so that is how this whole end-to-end cycle is basically created. Okay, so here we'll basically get the output as displayed. But always remember the main important thing that what we are learning over here is that we, again, these all things you don't have to worry about, like what will be the submission, where should it redirect and everything. That will be done by your front end team. But when that whole request comes to you, right, what you are going to do after that, you are basically using slash predict, then you are interacting with your model, then you are giving that as an output. This can be also created like a API, it can be also created like an API. Okay, like this slash predict is one API where I give all the values in the form of key value pairs. Okay, here just to give an example, I've created a small simple front end so that you'll be able to understand things. Okay, so this is how the whole end-to-end application basically works. But one thing that you really want to create, okay, now one thing, how did I do the deployment in Heroku platform, right? That also things needs to be remembered. So if you don't know, guys, what is Heroku? Heroku is basically a cloud platform. Okay, now here you can see Heroku is basically a cloud platform. So this is how a Heroku looks like. You have to basically create your account, and they provide you 5 different platforms. So you can host 5 different apps, inside your Heroku platform itself, right? 5 different apps. You can create 5 different application. More than 5, it will not allow you for completely for free. Okay. Now, how do you go ahead with? Now, see, I'll create new app. Now, first of all, whatever this application is there, guys, you also have to make sure that you have to create one requirement.txt file. I told you how to create a requirement.txt file. It is that you first of all you create an environment, right? Then you go to that specific environment like this. Suppose I have created an environment which says, suppose if I write activate databases. Okay, so I have created this environment for providing my databases tutorial, right? Now inside this environment, suppose if you really want to create a requirement.txt file, right? How do you create it? So for that, just go over here. You write something like this: pip freeze requirement.txt. So this is the command that you basically have to use. Okay, pip requirement.txt, right? Now, if I go this into my E drive, and suppose let me just go in some of the folders, like directory here, I will try to go into competitive programming. Suppose CD competitive programming. Let me just see directory over here. You can see that I don't have any requirement.txt file, right? But now, if I write pip freeze greater than requirement.txt, if I press enter, you'll be able to see that over here, if I go back in my competitive programming, there will be a requirement.txt file that will be created. And these are all the files that I've actually installed in this particular environment, all the libraries that I have installed in this particular environment. Okay. all these particular libraries, right, is basically created in this particular environment, right? So this way you'll be able to create in multiple environments. When usually in various scenarios you have to create multiple environments for different projects. Now this requirement.txt, you can use it in your Heroku platform also. And similarly, you will be able to see that this car prediction, this requirement.txt is basically created in that specific way. Okay. Now you have this requirement.txt. What you do is that you just go and take all these particular files and upload it in the GitHub. So if you go and see in GitHub, so this is my GitHub. And again, in a real world scenario, you probably will not be using GitHub repository. You'll be having different private repository, and then there you'll be using Git. Okay. So if I write car price prediction, now here you can see in car price prediction, I put up all these particular files. Okay. I put up all these particular files. Now, once I put up all these particular files, now let me just show how to do it in Heroku. As I told you, create new app. Suppose if I say car price should only contain number or dashes. Okay. Okay. So one. Suppose if I write, come on, man, or okay. So this is available now. I'm just going to create this app. Now in this app, you have options wherein from command line interface also you can upload all the files. From GitHub also you can upload all the files. Container registry also you can upload the files. Okay. CLI is nothing but from the local environment. You can basically write this kind of commands and you can basically upload all the files directly into the GitHub repository. But I'll show you the easy way, which is basically through GitHub. I'm just going to search my GitHub name, and remember this needs to be connected with my GitHub repository like this. Okay. If it is not connected, first you need to connect it. It will ask you the access, then you can actually connect it. Then what I'm going to do is that I'm basically going to write the car price. Now here you can see the car price prediction is there. I'll just connect to this. So this is basically getting connected to my GitHub repository, which is this one. Okay. And here, suppose if I have multiple branches also, I can connect to that specific branch also if I want. That is how beautiful Heroku platform is, you know. So now here you can see that it has got connected. You can also do enable automatic deploys. Enable automatic deploys. If I click this button, any changes that goes into this repository, automatically the deployment will start over here. Okay. And suppose if you have multiple branches, you can select multiple branches also over here. Right now, I just have master branch. Okay. But here we are just going to do the manual deployment. So I'm going to do the deploy branch. And this deploy branch, you can see that it has started. It is installing Python. It is installing pip. It will install every other things that is actually provided in the requirement.txt file. That is the reason why we provide requirement.txt file, right? So you will be able to see that this requirement.txt that we have actually created, it will try to install everything that is present over here, right? So Flask, this, scikit-learn, SkyPy, everything it is basically installing. Here you can see this. See this markup, save Jinja 2, it's dangerous, Flask, this, all the things are getting installed from the requirement.txt file. So it is very, very important that you give requirement.txt file in the whenever you are actually creating a Heroku platform, whenever you are deploying in the Heroku platform. So here you'll be able to see it will take some time to do it. Now you can see that this has been deployed to the Heroku, and this is your URL. Okay. For students, for freshers, I think you should work with Heroku platform. It is pretty much simple, and end-to-end application can be easily created. Okay. Now probably it will take another 1 minute. Now it has got deployed. If I go and click on view, and you can see that the same page is over here. Okay. So this was simple how, and now you just try to give whatever you want. Okay. and you calculate the selling price, you'll be able to see that the value you are getting is 9.23. This was a 10 lakh rupees car, and you just used it for 3,000 kilometers. Now it is saying that you sell this particular car at 9.23 lakhs. Okay. So, in short, this was all about this session itself, where we try to see it again. Coming over here, you can see that we have followed all the life cycle of a data science project: feature engineering, feature selection, model creation. Dockerization was not covered because, again, I have to do a lot of installation with Docker. But you can check my playlist with respect to Docker, and then we had also done model deployment in Heroku platform. You can also do the deployment in AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. For this also, you can check my deployment playlist in my YouTube channel. There you'll be able to find out each and everything. Okay. So yes, let me see whether I have missed anything or I've shown you this one. This one I've told you about Procfile. Procfile is also done. Index.html. Yeah. So yes, that was all from my side. If you have any questions, you can let me know. Guys, if you have any question.
Yes, sir. Uh, I have a question. Basically, when we can create a model using deep learning and machine learning also, right?
Yeah. But in
When we
Heroku, there
create
is a limit.
model name, right? Fashion means data set.
Huh?
We can do a model. We can build a model with machine learning or deep learning. Then, what is the basic difference between the implementing this model using machine learning or deep learning?
Deep learning you use basically called as neural networks. Okay, and neural networks is completely different. Machine learning techniques is completely different. So that way it basically works. In deep learning, you use the concept of the neural networks. You have CNN, you have this, but it is not possible that every problem you should actually go with deep learning techniques. Sometimes machine learning will be easily able to solve those. Yeah. Any more questions?
Sir, the question is from Achadia Nirav side. So the
Mhm.
question is how to know when to apply which feature is there. Any rule back like thing for project?
How to how to know when to apply
How to know
which
when to
feature?
apply which feature is there?
Which feature is there?
Any rule
See,
book like or
yeah. So I'll try to answer this. You know, it is not like when to apply which feature is there. While your requirement doing when you're doing the requirement gathering at that time, what they do is that the product owner decides like which all features are important. Yes, by using feature selection technique, you can basically understand which all features are important to solve that particular problem statement, and based on that you can decide like which all features we will be taking. But whenever you get a initial problem statement, there a data scientist along with the product owner will decide which all features are very very important.
Sir, in OpenCV, there are many inbuilt har cascade, but
Mhm.
I want to build my own, so I can't.
Uh,
How can
so,
I?
so with Har Cascade, that Har Cascade is actually built by the Intel people only, who have actually come up with that. So it becomes sometimes difficult. So because of that, if you are not able to do through Har Cascade, you have to go with your custom object detection model. There are various techniques like RCNN, masked RCNN. You have YOLO algorithms, you have SSD algorithms. So that is the reason why they have actually given those, right?
Thank you, sir.
Why did they use standard scalar in Flask app? The standard scalar were basically used over there, guys. Now, in case of random forest, you do not require standard scalar, but I had actually tried with different algorithms like linear regression, ridge regression. At that time, standard scaling was required because indirectly in the back end you'll be able to see in linear regression you have techniques like gradient descent and all. So to find out the optimal minima, what we do is that we usually consider doing standard scaling option also. But if you're using some decision trees, it is not required. How to decide the ratio of training data set and test data set? This is just randomly taken as 30%, but usually the best way that people usually go if you have many number of records is like 75% to 25%. For what values of feature importance can we say the number of features are redundant? For what values of feature importance? No, if you really want to find out whether the features are redundant, you basically do a correlation between the independent features. You basically do a correlation between the independent features, and when we do a correlation between independent features, suppose two independent features are 90% correlated, that basically means those are duplicate features. You can remove those specific feature itself if they are correlated, and I'm talking about independent features. I'm not talking about independent versus dependent, right? So that only feature importance. I think internally also it uses correlation indirectly. Okay. Is there?
Go
Yeah.
with PyCaret to test various models.
See, PyCaret is also a kind of automated library, but again, if you really don't want to understand everything from scratch, you can use directly that. But in the company, sometime they don't just use directly automated libraries. You have to do everything from scratch. You have to show the reports to everyone from scratch itself. What are the main
Okay.
concepts should we have grip in ML for a beginner? You have to be good at feature engineering. All the life cycle you have to be very, very good at in ML. You know, you need to know the maths behind the algorithm. You should know how to hyperparameter tune that specific model and all. Is there any steps to make a model in deep learning? There are very many steps. It depends like what kind of neural network you are actually using, like ANN, whether you're using CNN, DNN. Okay, let me just show you with respect to one, just a second. Let me just show you one deep learning model that I had actually created. I'm just going to share the screen. So for the deep learning model, guys, if you don't really have a huge powerful machine, I would suggest go with Google Colab. So I'll just show you over here. Tomato disease. I think it was tomato disease. Yeah. Just I'll just show you one example which I had actually created. And this, I think I had made it for my members in my YouTube channel. So here you can see that I'm just running this app.py, and this is actually running in GPUs. Okay. I have a powerful GPU. This workstation is having a powerful GPU itself. I'll try to show it to you. Okay, now you can see that this application is running over here. When I choose the file, so cotton disease, where is the file? Just a second. Now suppose if I give any data set from my test data, like any kind of problems that you have, right? If I just open this and if I do the prediction, if I do this particular prediction, right? You'll be able to see the result will be coming. So this was a kind of image classification that I had actually done for my members in my YouTube channel recently. So this was actually built on the whole deep learning model. And for this, if you really want to check it out, like how the code looks like, The code is actually present over here. You can see this. This was the whole code that was written with respect to deep learning. This is basically the neural network that is actually present, right? Then here you can see that the training that was done, the result that we got, and all these things are there. Okay. So this was just one example that I had actually shown with respect to this. Oh,
Hello.
yeah.
Sir, can you elaborate about just NLP and deep learning?
Sorry, I just got disconnected. So I was talking about NLP, right? NLP is a technique that will be used both in machine learning and deep learning. Uh, it is a kind of technique like in NLP. Recently, I had created a video, the complete roadmap to ACE in NLP. Right? If you see over here, no. So let me just show you that diagram. I think I'd created it somewhere. Okay, so in NLP, what happens in machine learning, you have techniques like you start with text pre-processing. You have techniques like bag of words, TF-IDF. You have techniques like average word to vec and all those things, which will be basically getting applied with machine learning algorithms like naive Bayes and all. But in the case of deep learning techniques, you have some more advanced techniques like embedding layers. You have transformers. You have attention models. You have encoders, decoders. You have LSTM, you have RNN, recurrent neural network. Right now, BERT is actually playing a very good role. If you have heard of GPT-3, right, that is a amazing thing they have actually come up. That is a transfer learning technique with respect to NLP. So probably in the future that will be getting used a lot because companies are doing some excellent work with natural language processing itself. Yeah, but it can be used in both machine learning and deep learning.
Sure, sir. Many people asking about the career in data science.
Career in data science as a fresher, you will be able to get roles as a junior data scientist. You may be able to get roles in internships, and there are a whole lot of requirements. It's just that you have to equip yourself by having the knowledge of that, because data science work requires a lot of thinking, a lot of innovations, things that actually happens. It's the way that you think in order to solve a particular problem. So you have to keep yourself prepared in that specific way so that you keep on working on that itself. Right.
Sir, while making a deep neural network, are there any techniques for choosing the best activation function or the best regularization techniques that we can achieve the highest accuracy?
So usually they say that the activation functions like ReLU. So nowadays, how things are actually happening is that if you really want to perform regularization, there are techniques like dropout layers. And with respect to the activation function, what they do is that since ReLU activation function works very, very well, in all the hidden layer, they use ReLU or leaky ReLU. And in the output layer, depending on the classification or the regression problem statement, they may use a softmax. If there are multiple categories, as a multi-label class, multi-binary class and all, at that time they may use softmax. Otherwise, they may be going with sigmoid if it is a binary class. So that is the proper strategy that is being used nowadays, because ReLU and leaky ReLU performs very, very well with respect to ReLU activation functions. But with respect to all the other things, I think that is the same process that they will basically follow. Again, and nowadays a lot of transfer learning technique is basically getting applied also in order to solve that particular problem. Next question, please.
Sir, can you paste a GitHub link on the chat box?
Yeah, I'll provide the GitHub link. So I had actually taken the live session for this also. So I'll give you that link only of my YouTube channel so that it'll be easy.
Sir, there are many students who have question about which are just starting the journey of data science to follow which playlist and which course to become master in data science.
Okay, let me just show that also to you. Okay, just give me a minute. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen so that I hope everybody is able to see my screen, right?
Sure, sir.
Now see, whenever you go to my, if you search for my name like Krish Nayak, right? So when you go inside this, as soon as you go inside this, there is a video which is called a step-by-step playlist to follow data science. Okay, just go and check out this whole playlist here. Sorry. Hello. Okay. So as soon as you go over here, you'll be able to see this step-by-step playlist. You just go to my channel like Krish Nayak, search for it. You'll be able to see step-by-step playlist to follow to learn data science thoroughly. So you just click on read more. So here you will be able to see all the playlist link I've given over here. What is the strategy that you need to follow? Okay. Like I've created more than 700 videos. So you just have to follow that. Okay. So here I've actually told you like how to go ahead, how to follow each and everything with respect to machine learning, deep learning, everything. Okay. Then the next thing that I wanted to suggest is with respect to live project playlist. So this whole thing I had actually implemented over here. Step by step, it is 1.5 hour video. So that also you can actually follow. So I'm just going to paste it in the link, in the link of this Google Hangout meeting. You can actually follow that whole playlist. Okay, just a second. So here is the whole playlist link that I've actually given with respect to this this one, with respect to this one. Okay, you can actually follow this itself, right? This whole thing you can actually follow this, and here is basically your this video you have to follow because it will actually show you how to follow the step-by-step playlist to learn data science. Okay. Yes, please. Any
Sir,
question?
what is your motivation? Sir, what is your motivation toward data science?
The motivation is just to solve more complex, more better problems for the betterment of the society. Let's say in that specific way.
Sir, what is basic requirement of GPU for deep learning?
What is the basic requirement of GPU for deep learning? See, GPU, basic GPU, I think you can't just say basic GPU because the GPU that you require is already present in Google Colab. Okay, there are various things. Right now, I am having Titan RTX, which is a very heavy GPU itself, right? And these all are costly. As a student, I think you should not invest much on GPU things because in Google Colab, everything they have completely given for free. So if you really want to execute anything over there, you can go and execute over there itself. I would suggest go and use Google Colab.
Sir, what are the books related to data science domain or deep learning or machine learning best we can use?
Books, as I said that there is something called as hands-on machine learning with TensorFlow by O'Reilly. O'Reilly, one book is there. You can actually follow that. That is a good book itself.
Yes, sir. I think it is available on the PDF drive.
Yeah.
So anyone can download for freely from that.
Yeah.
Sir, with the help of convolutional neural networks, can we fetch details from the live video or through the camera? Like we want to fetch the number plate from the CCTV cameras, then using CNN, can we do that?
Yeah, you can do it. Already there are a lot of applications that are going on with that. There are already things, and probably if you don't know, like I've been collaborating with iNeuron, where we have come up with that affordable course. We do all those kind of projects over there, where we teach all those kind of projects, where we involve computer vision, and probably that course is also going to start from 10th of this October month. And yes, I've also started teaching there from this coming batch. So all those things, what you're talking about, computer vision, live stream data, everything is basically getting covered.
Sir, how can I start learning reinforcement learning and semi-supervised learning? Because there are no such content in.
No, I'll be coming soon with reinforcement learning content in my YouTube channel.
Mamma mia.
So just stay tuned. In some days I'll be coming it. I've started preparing the materials for that also.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative session
No problem.
in which you covered all the important steps which is required for end-to-end machine learning project. It's time to propose the vote of thanks for today's wonderful event. First of all, I would like to thank the God Almighty for showing His blessing on us for success of this event. Next, I would like to express my gratitude toward our speaker, Mr. Krishnaik sir, for allotting his valuable time for enlightening us about machine learning. Furthermore, I feel immense bliss to thank our chapter advisor, Mr. Himanshu sir, for his constant guidance and motivation. Last but not the least, the success of today's event owes to the efforts and devotion of all our participants and volunteers. Thank you so much all for making this webinar successful. Thank you.
Thank you.